Edna was a poor, lonely girl. She had no mother, no father, no brothers, no sisters, nobody. She was all alone in the world. Every morning, Edna woke up inside the dry cleaner shop where she worked. That was her bed. That was her home. The owner of the shop allowed her to sleep on a small mat at the corner, near the washing machines. It wasn't because he cared. It was because he knew Edna had nowhere else to go. She worked from morning till night, washing clothes, ironing shirts, folding trousers. She was never paid well. But Edna never complained. She was just happy to have something to do, and a roof over her head. One hot afternoon, Edna sat quietly behind the shop, eating a small bowl of gari and groundnut. Her stomach growled as she quickly finished her meal. She picked up her plastic cup, about to drink the small water she had. Just then, bam, a woman bumped into her. The water splashed all over the woman's expensive golden gown. Edna's eyes widened in fear. "Oh my God. I'm very sorry, Ma," she cried, shaking. The woman turned around sharply. She was young, beautiful, and proud. Her name was Tina, the billionaire's fiancée. Tina looked at her dress, now soaked and stained. Without warning, slap. She slapped Edna hard across the face. "Are you blind?" Tina shouted, her face full of anger. Tears rushed to Edna's eyes. She knelt down immediately, begging, "Please, Ma. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Please forgive me." The dry cleaner shop owner, hearing the commotion, rushed out. He bowed in front of Tina, smiling nervously. "Ma, please forgive her. She's just a poor girl. I will caution her." Tina folded her arms, her nose in the air. "That's not enough. Sack her, or I will stop bringing my clothes here." She hissed loudly and angrily walked away, entering her rich fiancé's big black car. The shop owner turned to Edna. His eyes were cold. "Pack your things and leave," he said sharply. Edna fell on the ground, holding his leg and crying. "Please, sir. Please don't sack me. I have nowhere to go. Please, I beg you." But the man pushed her away roughly. "Get out," he shouted. Edna picked up her small nylon bag. Inside was just 2 shirts, 1 wrapper, and a worn-out slippers. That was all she had in the whole world. She carried the bag on her head and walked out of the shop. She didn't know where she was going. She had no one, no place to sleep. As she walked on the street, people passed her by. Some looked at her. Some pitied her. Some just shook their heads and continued their journey. The sun was going down. Night was coming. Cold breeze started to blow. But Edna kept walking and crying. "Where will I sleep tonight?" she said to herself. "God, why? Why is life so hard for me?" She passed a small wooden bench beside a clothes shop. She sat down there. She hugged her nylon bag tight and continued crying silently. The streets became quieter. The moon came out. The stars blinked in the dark sky. Dogs barked far away. Edna looked up at the sky. "Mama, Papa, if you can see me, please help me," she whispered, her voice shaking. Just then, a black car slowly drove past the street. It stopped not far from where Edna was sitting. The glass of the car rolled down a little. A man inside the car watched Edna from afar. He narrowed his eyes. He looked at her carefully. He could see her shaking in the cold. He could see her wiping her tears. The man quietly asked his driver, "Who is that girl sitting there?" The driver replied, "Sir, I don't know. She looks homeless." The man remained silent. Something about Edna touched his heart. He opened the car door slowly. The car door opened. A tall, handsome man stepped out. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but anyone with good eyes could tell he was very rich. His wristwatch alone could buy a whole street. He walked slowly toward Edna. Edna heard footsteps and quickly wiped her tears. She became afraid. She held her nylon bag tighter. Who knows if it's bad people, she thought, her heart beating fast. When the man reached her, he bent down a little. "Hello, young lady," he said softly. "Why are you sitting here all alone? Where is your home?" Edna swallowed hard. She looked up shyly. She saw his kind eyes and felt a little safe. But still, she shook her head and said quietly, I don't have a home, sir." The man frowned a little. "No home? What about your parents? Tears filled Edna's eyes again. She shook her head sadly. They are dead, so I have no one. I used to work at the dry cleaner shop, but they sacked me today. She broke into fresh tears, covering her face with her palms. The man's heart melted. He sat down gently beside her on the wooden bench, not minding the dust on his trousers. His driver watched from the car, surprised. It's okay, don't cry, the man said, handing her a clean white handkerchief from his pocket. Can you tell me what happened? Still sobbing, Edna told him everything. How she worked hard in the shop. How she lived inside the shop. How she mistakenly splashed water on Tina. How Tina slapped her and got her sacked. The man listened quietly, nodding. When she finished, he asked her softly, "What is your name?" "Edna, sir," she whispered. He smiled a little. "Nice name, Edna. My name is Kelvin." He stretched out his hand. Edna hesitated, then slowly shook his hand. His handshake was warm. Kelvin looked at her again, the torn dress, the tired face, the sadness in her eyes. Yet he could see something else. Strength, innocence, a pure heart. He stood up. "Edna," he said, smiling, "would you like to come with me? You can't sleep here on the street. It's dangerous." Edna's heart skipped. "Come with you?" she asked, her voice shaking. Kelvin nodded. "Don't be afraid. I won't harm you. I promise. You can stay in my house, safe, warm, until you figure out what you want to do with your life." Edna didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever been kind to her like this. She looked up at the sky, tears of confusion and fear in her eyes. Should I trust him, she thought. What if he's lying? What if he hurts me? Kelvin saw the fear in her face. He bent down again and said gently, "You don't have to say yes now. But you can't sleep on the street tonight. Even if you want, I can arrange for you to stay in my security quarters first, not inside my main house, until you feel safe with me." Edna blinked. This man was giving her an option. He was not forcing her. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay, sir. I will follow you," she whispered. Kelvin smiled warmly. "Good girl. Come," he said. He opened the car door for her like a princess. Edna entered shyly, sitting at the edge of the seat, holding her nylon bag tight. Kelvin entered beside her. The driver started the car and drove off into the night. Inside the car, Edna stared at the window silently. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what her future would be. But for the first time in a long time, she had a little hope. After about 15 minutes, the car slowed down in front of a huge black gate. The gate opened automatically. Edna's mouth opened wide in shock. Inside was a mansion bigger than anything she had ever seen in her life. Beautiful flowers lined the driveway. Bright lights shone on the walls. Big fountain water danced in the middle of the compound. Is this heaven? Edna thought, blinking fast. The car parked gently. Kelvin stepped out first and opened Edna's door. "Welcome, Edna," he said softly. "This is my home." Edna's legs shook as she stepped down. She felt small. She felt dirty. She felt like she didn't belong. Kelvin called his house manager, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Grace. "Mrs. Grace, please arrange a small room at the boys' quarters for her. Give her something to eat. Let her bathe and rest." Mrs. Grace looked at Edna kindly and nodded. "Come, my child," Mrs. Grace said, smiling warmly. As Edna followed Mrs. Grace, she turned her head and looked at Kelvin. He smiled at her and gave her a little wave. That night, Edna had her first real bath in a long time. She wore a clean nightgown Mrs. Grace gave her. She ate hot, delicious food. She slept on a real bed, soft like cotton. Before closing her eyes, Edna knelt by the bed and prayed. "Dear God, thank you. Thank you for sending me an angel tonight." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. The next morning, the bright sun shone through the curtains. Edna woke up in the soft bed, feeling like she was still dreaming. She rubbed her eyes and looked around. The room was beautiful. The white bed sheets, the shiny floor, the nice smell of fresh flowers. "Is this real?" she whispered to herself. Mrs. Grace knocked softly and entered with a smile. "Good morning, my child." "Come and eat breakfast," she said kindly. Edna smiled shyly and nodded. She wore the simple gown Mrs. Grace gave her and followed her to the dining area outside. Meanwhile, Kelvin was already sitting in the living room, reading some papers, waiting for someone. Today, Tina, his fiancée, was coming to visit. Few minutes later, a big white car drove into the compound. Tina stepped out, looking beautiful and proud as always. She wore a short red dress and carried a small gold handbag. She walked into the living room with a big smile. "Baby," she called out. Kelvin looked up and forced a small smile. "You're welcome, Tina," he said calmly. Tina walked over and hugged him. But then, as she pulled back, her eyes caught someone standing at the corner. Edna. Tina's eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open. Her hands froze in the air. "You?" Tina shouted, pointing at Edna. "What is this useless girl doing here?" Tina screamed. Edna stepped back quickly, frightened. Kelvin stood up, his face turning serious. "Tina, lower your voice," he said. Tina turned to him angrily. "Baby, this is the same foolish girl that poured water on me at that dry cleaner shop. The one I told you about. She splashed water on my clothes and made me look stupid. What is she doing here?" Kelvin's face changed. He dropped the papers he was holding and walked closer to Tina. "Tina," he said in a calm but firm voice. "So you are the one that got her sacked from her former job, just because of a mistake she made?" Tina crossed her arms proudly. Of course. She was careless. She deserved to be sacked. Tina said proudly. Kelvin shook his head sadly. "Tina, that's very wicked of you," he said. "Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. Even you, Tina, you're not perfect. And yet, when she begged you, you still pushed for her to be fired. You made her lose the little job she had to survive." Tina frowned. "And so what?" she said. Kelvin's voice rose a little, his face full of anger. "Tina, when I saw her on the street that night, she had nowhere to sleep. She was sitting on the cold street, crying, holding her small nylon bag with all her life inside it. If I had not rescued her, she would have slept outside, maybe even gotten harmed." Tina rolled her eyes. "Baby, you're making noise over a common street girl." Kelvin pointed at Edna. "She's not just a street girl. She's a human being. She has feelings like you and me. And because of your wickedness, she lost everything." Tina's mouth tightened. She looked at Edna like she was dirt. Kelvin continued. "From now on, she will stay here. She will work with Mrs. Grace. And she will be safe. Until she figures out what she wants to do with her life." Tina gasped loudly. "What? You want this thing to live here?" Kelvin stepped even closer, his face serious. "Yes. She will stay here. And more than that, Tina, you will apologize to her." Tina laughed mockingly. "Me? Apologize? To this dirty thing? Never." Kelvin's eyes darkened. "You will apologize, Tina. It's the right thing to do. You treated her badly. You made her suffer. And now you must right your wrong." Tina shook her head stubbornly. "Never. Why should I apologize when she was the one that poured water on me?" Kelvin sighed heavily, disappointed. "Tina, it's not about the water anymore. It's about kindness. It's about humanity. It's about having a heart." Edna stood at the corner quietly, looking at the ground. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, not from sadness, but because someone was standing up for her for the first time in her life. Tina looked at Kelvin, her face full of anger. "Baby, you're choosing a street girl over me." Kelvin didn't answer immediately. He just looked at Tina quietly, and the silence said it all. Tina's face turned red with anger. Her chest rose and fell fast. She couldn't believe it. "Kelvin, you are humiliating me because of this useless orphan girl," she shouted. Kelvin picked up his papers and said calmly, "Tina, if you can't apologize, then you can leave. I won't force you." Tina's mouth dropped open. She stared at Kelvin like she didn't know him again. Without another word, Tina turned sharply on her heels and stormed out of the house, her high heels making loud, angry sounds on the tiles. Edna stood there, shaking. She wanted to disappear. She felt she was the reason for all this trouble. Mrs. Grace walked over to Edna and hugged her gently. "Don't worry, my child. Everything will be fine," she whispered. But deep inside Tina's heart, as she sat inside her car, squeezing her steering wheel tightly, a wicked plan was already growing. "I will make her life a living hell," Tina said through gritted teeth. She will regret ever meeting Kelvin. The next few days, Tina started working her wicked plan step by step. She knew Kelvin had a soft heart. If Edna made any little mistake, she would use it against her. Tina came to the mansion pretending to be nice. She smiled fake smiles. She brought gifts. She hugged Kelvin in front of Edna, pretending she had forgotten everything. But inside her heart, it was full of evil. One afternoon, when Kelvin was not around, Tina visited the house again. She met Edna outside, watering flowers in the garden. Tina walked up to her, wearing a fake sweet smile. "Hello, little Edna," Tina said, her voice like honey hiding poison. Edna turned and greeted her politely. "Good afternoon, Ma," she said, bowing her head. Tina smiled wider and stepped closer. "You're enjoying yourself, right? Eating good food, sleeping on a soft bed, living in this big mansion, hum." Edna shook her head shyly. "I'm just working here, Ma. I'm helping Mrs. Grace," she said quietly. Tina bent low to Edna's ear and whispered in a cold voice, "Enjoy it while it lasts, because very soon you will cry tears you have never cried before." Edna froze. She didn't understand what Tina meant, but her heart started beating fast. Tina stood up straight again, smiling like nothing happened. "Continue, my dear," she said and walked into the house, her red dress flowing behind her. Edna stood there, holding the watering can tightly with trembling hands. What did she mean? She thought, fear creeping into her chest. That evening, after Kelvin returned from work, Tina pretended to be very sad. She sat beside Kelvin in the living room, playing with her gold bracelet. "Baby," she said softly, her eyes fake wet with tears. "I don't want to cause problems, but that girl, Edna." Kelvin looked up from his laptop. "What about her?" he asked. Tina sighed heavily, acting like she was hurt. "I caught her today. She was making fun of me behind your back. She said I'm proud, that I'm not even beautiful, that you don't love me truly." Kelvin frowned. "That's not possible. Edna is not like that," he said. Tina quickly wiped fake tears from her eyes. "Why would I lie? I heard it with my own ears." She said it to Mrs. Grace while watering the flowers. Kelvin's face grew serious. Doubt started creeping into his mind. "Are you sure, Tina?" Tina nodded quickly, pretending to be hurt. "Baby, I don't want to fight. But if you keep that ungrateful girl here, she will destroy us." Kelvin didn't say anything. He just looked away, thinking. Meanwhile, Edna was in the small kitchen, helping Mrs. Grace prepare dinner. She didn't know that trouble was brewing against her. As she chopped onions, her heart felt heavy. Something was not right. "God, please help me," she prayed silently. After dinner, as Edna was washing plates, Kelvin called her into the sitting room. "Edna, come here," he said, his voice cold. Edna quickly washed her hands and rushed out, standing before him, her hands folded in front. "Yes, sir," she said. Kelvin looked at her, his face serious. "Did you insult Tina today?" he asked directly. Edna's mouth opened wide in shock. "No, sir. I can never do that. I didn't say anything bad about her," she said, her voice shaking. Tina folded her arms and smirked. "She's lying, baby. She's pretending." Kelvin looked confused. Edna dropped on her knees. "Please, sir. I swear with my life. I didn't say anything. Mrs. Grace was with me. Ask her." Kelvin looked toward the kitchen, but said nothing. Tina quickly interrupted. Maybe she planned with Mrs. Grace to hide it. "Baby, don't let this street girl fool you." Tears rushed to Edna's eyes. She looked at Kelvin with pleading eyes. "Sir, please believe me. I have never insulted anyone before. Why would I insult the person that made me lose my job? I only prayed to God to touch her heart, that's all." Kelvin stood up slowly and walked toward the balcony, deep in thought. Edna knelt there, crying quietly. Mrs. Grace came out and held Edna's shoulders gently. "Don't worry, my child. The truth will come out, she whispered. But inside Tina's heart, she was smiling. This is just the beginning, Tina said in her mind. I will disgrace you, Edna, until you run away with shame. That night, Edna could not sleep. She lay on her small bed in the boys' quarters, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy. Why is Tina lying against me? Why is she trying to destroy me? She turned from side to side, but sleep refused to come. Tears rolled down her cheeks onto her pillow. Meanwhile, inside the main house, Tina and Kelvin were sitting quietly in the living room. Kelvin was confused. He didn't know who to believe. Tina leaned close to him and whispered sweetly, "Baby, you know I love you. Everything I'm doing is to protect you. That girl Edna is pretending. If you keep her here, she will bring shame to your name." Kelvin didn't say anything. Deep inside him, something told him Edna was innocent. But Tina was twisting his mind with lies. Tina saw that Kelvin was not fully convinced yet. She knew she needed to act fast. So, she thought of an even more wicked plan. The next morning, when Kelvin left for work, Tina sneaked into the mansion again. Mrs. Grace was busy at the back garden. Edna was mopping the living room floor. Tina smiled wickedly to herself. She quietly opened Kelvin's private study room. She took out a gold wristwatch from the drawer, one of Kelvin's most expensive watches, and hid it inside Edna's small bag where she kept her clothes in the boys' quarters. After doing this, Tina brushed her hands proudly. "Let's see how you will escape this one," she whispered, laughing silently. Later in the afternoon, Tina called Kelvin on phone. "Baby, something terrible has happened," she cried, fake tears. Kelvin became worried. "What is it, Tina?" he asked. "Your expensive gold wristwatch is missing. I think Edna stole it." Kelvin gasped. "What? Are you sure?" "Yes. I checked everywhere. It's gone. And who else could have taken it? She's the only outsider living here now." Kelvin dropped the phone and rushed home immediately. When Kelvin arrived, he called Mrs. Grace, Edna, and Tina into the living room. "Everyone, listen," Kelvin said, his voice strong. "My gold wristwatch is missing, and I must find it today." He turned to Edna. "Edna, I'm sorry, but I must search your things." Edna's hands shook. "So, I didn't take anything, but you can search. I have nothing to hide," she said bravely, though her heart was beating fast. Mrs. Grace looked worried. "Olga, Kelvin, this girl is not a thief," she tried to say, but Kelvin raised his hand. "Please, Ma, let me be sure," he said. They all marched to Edna's small room. Kelvin opened her nylon bag, checked her clothes, and then he found the gold wristwatch inside. Edna gasped loudly. Her legs almost gave way. No, I swear I didn't put it there. I swear on my life," she cried, falling on her knees. Tina folded her arms and smirked proudly. "I told you, baby, this street girl is a thief." Kelvin's face became dark with disappointment. "Edna, why? After everything, why?" he said, his voice full of hurt. Edna shook her head, crying loudly. "Sir, please believe me. I didn't steal anything. Someone must have put it there. Please, sir, believe me." Mrs. Grace also spoke. "So, I have lived with this girl for weeks now. She is honest. She is hardworking. She has a pure heart. She can never steal." But Kelvin's heart was already poisoned by Tina's lies. He pointed at Edna. "Pack your things. Leave my house today," he said harshly. Edna screamed in tears. "Please, sir, please. I have nowhere to go. Please, I beg you." Kelvin turned his face away. "Go." Tina smiled secretly, victorious. Later that evening, under the heavy rain, Edna walked out of the mansion with a nylon bag on her head. She had no umbrella. She had no jacket. Rain soaked her from head to toe. Her slippers made squashing sounds in the mud. She walked and walked, shivering in the cold. "God, why? What did I do wrong?" she cried as the rain beat her hard. Dogs barked in the dark. Lightning flashed in the sky. Thunder roared. Nobody cared about her. Nobody stopped to help. She walked until she reached a small abandoned wooden shack by the roadside. She entered inside, coughing and sneezing. She sat on the cold floor, hugging her knees tightly, crying bitterly. God, if you can hear me, please don't let me die like this. She prayed with all her heart, as she cried herself to sleep in that dark, cold shack. Far away in the big mansion, Kelvin sat in his room, unable to sleep. Something was bothering his heart. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That night after Edna left, the house became strangely quiet. Too quiet. Kelvin sat alone in the living room. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching it. He just stared blankly at the screen, his heart heavy. Everywhere he looked, he remembered Edna. He remembered how she would quietly sweep the floor, how she would water the flowers, how she would greet him with a small shy smile. Now, the house felt empty, cold, sad. Kelvin rubbed his chest. It felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. He stood up and paced around the room. Why do I feel this way? He asked himself. He tried to distract himself. He picked up his laptop to work, but he couldn't concentrate. He tried to eat, but the food tasted like sand in his mouth. He tried to sleep, but he tossed and turned on the bed, staring at the ceiling. What is wrong with me? He whispered into the darkness. He turned to the side of the bed where he placed his wristwatch. He picked it up slowly. The same wristwatch that caused all this pain. Kelvin stared at it deeply, and for the first time, doubt entered his heart. Edna didn't look like someone who could steal. Her tears, they were real. Maybe I made a mistake. His chest tightened even more. He stood up from the bed and walked to the window, looking out into the dark night. Where is she now? He thought sadly. Is she safe? Is she alive? A cold breeze entered the room. Kelvin shivered, but not from the cold. It was the guilt inside him. The next morning, Mrs. Grace knocked on Kelvin's door. Good morning, sir, she said softly. Kelvin looked tired and sad. Good morning, Mrs. Grace, he replied. Mrs. Grace looked at him for a moment, then spoke carefully. So, I know I'm just a worker here, but please, forgive me if I speak freely. Kelvin nodded. Go ahead. Mrs. Grace sighed. So, you made a mistake by sending that poor girl away. Kelvin's heart squeezed. Mrs. Grace continued. Edna is not a thief. I know it in my bones. That girl is pure. Somebody set her up. I don't know who or how, but she is innocent. Kelvin closed his eyes tightly. He felt like crying. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said, his voice shaking. Mrs. Grace stepped closer. Follow your heart, sir. Your heart knows the truth. With that, she bowed respectfully and left the room. Kelvin sat on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. What have I done? He whispered. Without wasting time, Kelvin picked up his car keys. He rushed down the stairs. He met Tina waiting in the living room, dressed beautifully as usual. Baby, where are you going? Tina asked, smiling sweetly. Kelvin didn't even look at her. Out, he said coldly. Tina's smile faded. Out. To where? She asked sharply. Kelvin paused at the door and turned slightly. I'm going to look for Edna, he said firmly. Tina's eyes widened in shock. What? After everything she did. Kelvin looked her straight in the eyes. I need to find out the truth, Tina. I can't have peace until I know. Without waiting for her reply, Kelvin walked out, slammed the door behind him, and jumped into his car. Tina stood there, shaking with anger. This is not over, Edna, she whispered bitterly. I will finish you. Meanwhile, Edna sat in the cold, abandoned shack by the roadside. Her clothes were still wet from yesterday's rain. She hugged her knees tightly, coughing badly. Her lips were dry. Her stomach was empty. She had not eaten anything since she left Kelvin's house. She looked out through the broken window at the busy road. Cars passed. People passed. Nobody cared. God, have you forgotten me? She whispered weakly. She closed her eyes, and tears rolled down again. At that moment, a black SUV sped down the road and slowed down near the shack. Kelvin's heart pounded. Please, God, help me find her. He looked left. He looked right. Then, something caught his eye. A small figure sitting inside the broken shack. He stopped the car and jumped out. Edna, he shouted. Edna opened her tired eyes. She thought she was dreaming. She saw Kelvin running toward her, his shirt flying in the breeze. "Edna!" he shouted again. Tears filled Edna's eyes. She tried to stand up, but her legs were too weak. Kelvin rushed inside, knelt down, and carried her into his arms. "Oh my God, what have I done?" he whispered, hugging her tightly. Edna cried into his chest. "I'm sorry, so. I'm sorry," she sobbed. Kelvin shook his head, tears falling from his eyes too. "No, Edna. I'm the one who is sorry. I'm so sorry." He carried her gently to the car. Kelvin drove fast back to the mansion, one hand on the steering wheel, the other gently holding Edna's weak hand. Every few seconds, he looked at her. Her head rested softly on the seat. Her face was pale. Her eyes were tired. But even in her weakness, there was something about Edna, a quiet beauty, a pure heart that made Kelvin's chest ache with guilt. "I must make things right," he swore in his heart. As they reached the mansion, Mrs. Grace ran out, shocked to see Kelvin carrying Edna in his arms. "Oh Lord Jesus! What happened to her?" Mrs. Grace cried. "She's weak. Prepare a hot bath and food immediately," Kelvin ordered, his voice strong. He carried Edna into the guest room, a beautiful, clean room inside the main house, and laid her gently on the bed. Mrs. Grace rushed around preparing warm food and hot water. Meanwhile, Tina was sitting in the living room, painting her nails, acting like nothing happened. She didn't know the storm that was about to hit her. Later that evening, after Edna had eaten a little and was resting, Kelvin came downstairs. His face was dark like thunder. He called out sharply, "Tina!" Tina jumped up, dropping her nail polish bottle. "Baby, you're back," she said, smiling sweetly. Kelvin didn't smile. He didn't hug her. He didn't even blink. "Sit down," he commanded. Tina frowned a little but obeyed. Kelvin stood in front of her, arms crossed. "Tell me, Tina, how did my wristwatch enter Edna's bag?" Tina's heart skipped. Baby, what are you saying?" "She stole it. We found it in her bag." Kelvin shook his head slowly. "No, Tina. Mrs. Grace told me something this morning, and now everything is clear." Tina swallowed hard. "Did she tell you?" she stammered. Kelvin's voice rose. "She told me that you were the only one who had access to my study room that day. She told me you sneaked around when everyone was busy." Tina stood up, panicking. "Baby, she's lying. That old woman hates me." Kelvin's eyes burned with anger. "Enough, Tina. How could you do such an evil thing to an innocent girl? A girl who has suffered all her life. You framed her. You made me send her into the streets like a dog." Tina's lips trembled. I was just trying to protect you. I didn't want her to ruin us." Kelvin stepped closer, his voice deadly cold. "Protect me? By destroying another human being. By lying. By almost killing her." Tina burst into tears. "Baby, please, forgive me. It was a mistake. I was jealous. I saw the way you looked at her sometimes. I was afraid of losing you." Kelvin stared at her with disgust. "You already lost me, Tina," he said quietly. Tina gasped. "No, baby, please, we can fix this. Please don't leave me." She knelt down and grabbed his leg. "Please, Kelvin, don't break up with me. Please. I love you." Kelvin shook his leg free. "I cannot marry someone with a wicked heart," he said firmly. "Love without kindness is nothing. You are beautiful outside, Tina, but inside, you are ugly. I don't want an ugly soul beside me for the rest of my life." Tina cried louder, her makeup running down her face. "Please, Kelvin, please. I'll change. I'll apologize to Edna. I'll do anything. Please don't throw me away." But Kelvin turned away from her. "Goodbye, Tina," he said without emotion. He walked up the stairs, leaving her crying and screaming on the floor. Days passed. Edna's health got better. She regained her strength. Her cheeks became rounder. Her smile started to come back. Every morning, Kelvin would find himself standing by her door, looking at her while she slept peacefully. Something was happening inside his heart. Something warm. Something soft. Something dangerous. What is happening to me? Kelvin asked himself one night. He sat on the balcony, sipping tea, thinking about Edna. He remembered her soft voice, her shy smile, her kind heart. Is it possible? He asked himself. Am I falling for Edna? He shook his head at first, trying to deny it. No, she's just a poor girl I rescued, that's all. But no matter how he tried, the truth was clear. Kelvin was slowly falling in love with Edna. Days turned into weeks. Kelvin found it harder and harder to hide his feelings. Every time Edna walked into the room with her shy smile, his heart would beat faster. He would sit in meetings at work, but instead of focusing on contracts and papers, his mind would drift back to Edna. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. The way she laughed quietly when Mrs. Grace told her old stories. The way her heart remained pure, even after all the pain she had suffered. She deserves happiness, Kelvin said to himself one evening. She deserves the world. And he decided he was going to make her feel special. The next morning, Kelvin left the mansion early. He drove to the city's biggest boutique. He bought beautiful dresses, soft gowns, colorful skirts, stylish shoes. He chose clothes that would make Edna feel like a princess. After that, he stopped at a flower shop. He picked a bouquet of fresh white and pink roses. Simple, pure, beautiful, just like Edna. He placed everything carefully in the back seat of his car, smiling to himself. Today, I will make her smile, he whispered. Edna was in the garden, watering the flowers, humming a small song to herself. She had no idea what was coming. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a car horn. She turned around, and there was Kelvin, stepping out of his car, carrying big shopping bags and a bouquet of flowers. Edna blinked, confused. Good afternoon, sir, she said shyly, wiping her hands on her apron. Kelvin walked up to her, smiling warmly. Good afternoon, Edna, he said gently. He handed her the bouquet first. Edna gasped. For me, sir, she asked, her eyes wide. Kelvin nodded. Yes, Edna, you deserve beautiful things. Edna held the flowers close to her chest. The sweet smell filled her nose. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. Kelvin then opened the shopping bags and showed her the clothes. These are for you too, he said. Edna covered her mouth with her hands, shocked. So, I don't know what to say. Kelvin chuckled softly. Just say you'll wear them and be happy, he said. Edna nodded quickly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. God bless you, so. She cried. Kelvin stepped closer and wiped her tears gently with his thumb. No more tears, Edna. From today, you will only smile, he said softly. Their eyes locked for a long moment. In that moment, the world disappeared. No more pain. No more fear. Just two hearts beating as one. That evening, after dinner, Kelvin called Edna to the garden. The moon was shining bright. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Edna walked toward him, wearing one of the new simple pink dresses he bought for her. She looked like an angel. Kelvin's heart pounded. He cleared his throat. Edna, he said. She looked up at him with her innocent eyes. Yes, so. Kelvin smiled nervously. Stop calling me so. My name is Kelvin, he said. Edna blushed and nodded shyly. Okay, Kelvin. Kelvin took a deep breath. Edna, I have something to tell you. You came into my life by accident. But somehow, you filled an empty space in my heart. You made me see what true kindness is. You made me feel alive again. Edna listened, her hands trembling a little. Kelvin continued. I know I am older than you. I know life has been unfair to you. But if you allow me, I want to be the man who will protect you, who will cherish you, who will love you forever. Tears rolled down Edna's cheeks again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. Kelvin, I don't know if I deserve this kind of happiness, she whispered. Kelvin took her small hands into his big warm hands. You deserve more, Edna. You deserve the whole world. He bent down on one knee, surprising her. He brought out a small ring, simple, but beautiful. Edna, will you give me the honor of being your husband one day? Edna burst into tears, covering her mouth. She nodded quickly, unable to speak. Kelvin stood up and placed the ring gently on her finger. Then he pulled her into a warm, tight hug. For the first time in her life, Edna felt safe. She felt loved. She felt at home. Months later, the whole city buzzed with excitement. Kelvin and Edna's wedding was the talk of the town. Rich people, poor people, everyone came to celebrate the love story of a billionaire and a once poor orphan girl. Mrs. Grace danced with joy. Flowers filled the hall. Music played. Edna wore a simple white gown, shining with happiness. As Kelvin and Edna said their vows, tears filled the eyes of everyone present. From today onward, Kelvin said, his voice strong, you will never cry alone again. Edna smiled brightly. And I will love you with all my heart, forever, she replied. They kissed sweetly under the bright lights, and the whole hall clapped and cheered. Edna's story was no longer one of pain. It became a story of hope, love, and a new beginning. The end.